first client that had an eating disorder was in 1979, and I was working at a college campus in the Midwest. This young woman came to the counseling center at the campus seeking treatment. Her father was a professor, and he told me she had anorexia. And I said, "What's that?" And I began to offer her treatment and failed miserably, and couldn't stand it that I failed. And so then I started seeing even more students coming in who were having eating problems, like some couldn't keep their meals down, some were binging, others purging, and many were starving. And so I started these lists of files that had questions. Okay, what's family oriented in these problems? What's social impact on these problems? What's biological? And I could not figure out why I was failing so much in treating those students. Our clinic was doing very well on all the other issues. So then I decided to go get my doctorate, and I went interviewing for my doctorate and said, I need courses that answer the questions for the following things so that I can figure out the answer, because I feel behind on this. And they said, well, you can get a degree in counseling psychology and meet those requirements. So I proceeded to get my doctorate, and every course that I took, I wrote the research papers on trying to understand the eating disorder illness from that perspective, only to realize that I was just entering the field when the field was beginning, since the first diagnosis was in 1980, and that people that I was writing and talking to about their research were people that have become the key international researchers in the field since the early 80s.
So while you were in New York and getting your graduate, your PhD, I was at Harding Hospital directing the Adolescent Day Treatment Program. Adolescents were in that program all day, and nobody knew anything about eating disorders, but I had one adolescent girl who wasn't eating, was losing weight, and nobody really knew what to do about that. So our treatment team would talk about, but we didn't really use the word eating disorder. We were just talking about eating issues. And then we, along that same time, had another girl who was diabetic, type 1 diabetic, and she was using her insulin to control her eating and purge. And even using that word back then wasn't really something that we did, but I had experience with girls in the Adolescent Day Treatment Program who were dieting, who were beginning some eating issues. And then I was aware in Columbus of the support groups that had started back in the late 70s, early 80s even, for eating disorders, and then those services came to Harding.
Mm-hmm.
So my history was working with adolescents and then watching the eating disorder services develop at Harding through the conferences. Mm-hmm. I went to the conferences, even though I didn't have a specialty in eating disorders at the time. So that kind of brings me to where I was, and then you coming to Harding. And
well, I came to Harding Hospital in 1987, and one of the things that they said, okay, as the new dietitian on the staff, we need you to be part of the team that is going to develop the eating disorder program for Harding Hospital, which was one of the first in the country. And so I literally was on the ground level of learning about eating disorders and practicing and setting the nutrition protocols and standards that we still use today. And what is exciting is I set those then based on the information we had available. They seemed to work for the clients, but we didn't really know why they worked for the clients until recently, now that we have the neurobiology research. So it's come full circle, and that's where I met both of you. and working with you through Harding and the national organization, and that's how we got our start in meeting.